Hi, I'm Ashley from Sunny Made, and today we are on week 4 of the Ultimate Beginner Quilt. Hello friends, welcome back. I'm glad you're here. It is time for week 4. So let's go over what we've covered so far. In week 1, we talked about the supplies we need, both fabric and sewing supplies that we need to create our quilt. Week 2, we cut our fabric out into squares. Week 3, we laid out our quilt, decided how we wanted it to go, and we sewed all our rows together. So now we're on week 4, and I'm going to go over ironing and sewing our rows together. So let me show you where you should be at this point. So you should have 12 strips that look just like this, okay? All of these are a row. I have labeled them, which row number they are, and this is going to be the left side of my quilt all the way down, so I've kept it uniform so I know where I'm going from here. Now let me show you what it's gonna look like when we're done. This is 6 rows of my quilt. It looks like this. Okay, so here we're beginning to see it come together. So we are going to take these strips and make it look like this week, and then we'll have a completed quilt top. Okay, so first what we want to do is iron these. Now we have sewn each of these from left to right, one on top of the other. We did not iron them in between, okay? So now we have our rows. What we want to do is make sure that we iron our seams so that when we put the rows together, they nest. And what that means is you have the seams that come together like this. One side of the seam is going to go this way. The other side of the seam is going to go this way. And then they fit nice and flat in your rows. So what we're going to do is we are going to take our first strip over to the ironing board, and I'm going to walk you through how we are going to iron each strip. I have my ironing board and I have my iron. It is nice and flat. You can decide how you want to use your iron. I put it on cotton because that is an option. It's the highest setting, and I use steam. There are actually a lot of quilters that don't like to use steam on their quilt blocks. I like to use steam, but it is up to you for personal preference. So what we're going to do is grab our first strip. So this is my number 1 strip. Okay, we are going to iron. I almost said sew there. We are going to iron all of our odd number strips in one direction and all our even number strips in the other direction. So I'm going to start with my number here on my right side, and I'm actually going to take it off for this real quick, but I'm going to put it back on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold up my fabric and iron from the number side, start with my number side, and go to the non-number side. And I'm going to, if I hold up my fabric like this, it's going to make sure that my seams are all going towards the non-number side. I hope that makes sense. So when it hits the seam, it goes to the non-number side and it will iron towards that other side. And then just adjust it. Okay. And I hit the end with that last little bit. Now, this is my number side. This is the side I had my number pinned to. This is my non-number side. And if you can see, looking up, they all go towards that direction. Oh, you can't see me. That direction. So they start this way and they go down this way. Okay, now I'm going to pin my number back on so I don't forget that it's my first one. And I'm going to set this aside. Okay, number 2. We are going to start from the non-number side. And if you want, you're welcome to go ahead and take that number off. And again, start your iron on one side, and we're just going to run it down the whole strip as we hold it up. That will guarantee that the seam goes towards the number side. Okay, I'm going to put my number back, and then I will show you, ow, just poked myself, what we did. So we have number here, and all of our seams are going towards the number. So if you see here, once again, it's going that direction. Now, why do we want this to go that way, where one's going one way and the other one's going the other way? And this is what I was talking about with nesting seams. When I put them right on top of each other, so I'm going to sew these 2 rows together. I will end up, 1 is my top one, 2 is my second one, and I'm going to put them right on top of each other like this. And then I'm going to sew down this edge. If you look, let me get these nested nice and pretty so you can see what we're doing. If you lay the seam like this seam goes this way and the bottom one goes this way. So they are going 2 different directions. And what that allows us to do is butt up those 2 seams together and make it lay flat once I sew the long strips together, and it doesn't create a big bunch there in the fabric. So what we're going to do is we're going to always do our odd ones towards our non-numbered side and our even ones toward our numbered side. Did I say that right? Odd towards non-number, evens towards the number. If when you go to iron your strips, if it would be easier instead of doing it from the top, you're always welcome to start on the back side and lay it out flat. And then if you take your iron and still go the same direction, this is a row 6, so I'm going towards the number. You can go ahead and iron it from the back so all your seams are going in the right direction. And then if you want, you are welcome to flip it over and just make sure that everything on the front is lying nice and flat. Okay, now that we have all of these ironed in the correct direction, it is time for us to sew the strips together. So we are going to start by taking our first 2, 1 and 2, and laying them out. So number 1 is on top, number 2 is on the bottom. Okay. You can go ahead and take your numbers off if you would like, but you don't have to. You can leave one on just so that you remember which direction is the number side. And then you're going to fold it over the top, one on top of the other, right sides together. And each of these pieces that we have cut out in our blocks, you can line up the seams. So what we want to do is, even though the strips all go this way, we want to make sure also that our seams this direction all line up as well. So go ahead and grab your pins, and we are going to pin these together. Okay, so we have our two pieces together, one on top of the other, and we're going to start by lining up each seam. We want our seams to go just like this so you can see them that direction. And then what we're going to do is grab a pin and put that pin right where those two seams come together. And then we're going to go to the next two, line them up, and honestly, you can feel right here if they line up. Put in your next pin. Okay, and we're going to go all the way across. Once you get used to sewing and lining up seams, you're not going to need to pin if you don't want to. I do know a lot of quilters that still like to pin their seams. If I feel like it's going to be hard for my seams to line up, I will still pin them. Okay, and we're going to pin these all the way down these two strips together. Okay, we have both of our strips put together and pinned. Okay, this is the side of our numbers. I have number 2. This is number 1. I just removed that number so I wouldn't sew through it. And we have all our seams pinned. Let me show you again what it means to nest. So up here on this one, the seam goes to the left, and on the bottom one, the seam goes to the right, and we've nested those two pieces together. So now I'm just going to send this through my sewing machine and do a 1/4 inch down the side that we just pinned. As we go along, we're going to pull out our pin right before it gets to our sewing foot, because we don't want that pin to go through where our needle is. Okay, now that we have this all sewn together, we're taking it back to our ironing board and we're laying it flat so the seam side is the side away from us. What I'm first going to do is hit that seam with my iron, and this just relaxes the stitches and the fabric and will help it lay flatter. I am then going to open it up and press it all along that seam that we just sewn. Make sure that the fabric is lying flat. Okay. Oh, I didn't get it all the way across. Get that number out of the way. Okay, so here we have our first two strips together. If I put my number back over here, you can see we have 1 and then 2. What I'm going to do at this point is trim any threads. I like to do this between each long seam, each row. I'm going to trim. I actually have a whole bunch right now, so I'm going to trim all of those out. Then I'm going to take number 3, which is my next one, and lay it here next to the other one. Flip it over, pin my seams, take it to the sewing machine, sew it, bring it back, and iron it open. Okay, I sewed my strips together in groups of 6, just kind of like you saw it at the beginning of the video. I then sewed those two groups of 6 together to create my finished product, my finished quilt top. Now the reason I do that is sometimes when you're working with, say you get down to the 10 or 11 strip and you're adding on just one small one, it gets heavy. Sometimes it's hard to get through the sewing machine. And so I kind of just like to put it together into 2 sets and then sew those 2 sets together in half. And so now we have a finished quilt top. It's 12 rows this way, 12 columns this way, and if you did it correctly, you should have some nice squares, square points when 4 squares are coming together. And this is what our quilt top is going to look like. If you have any questions, make sure that you leave them in the comment section below. Next week, we are going to go over how to quilt our quilt. We are going to do it on our home machine, so you don't need anything fancy. That's part of the reason why I didn't want to make this too big. You get too big, it's hard to do it in your home machine, and then you'll need someone to either long arm it for you or you can do it yourself. So get your quilt put together, your quilt top, decide what you want to use for backing, and we will talk about backing and batting next week, and we will talk about how to get the quilt quilted. Also, make sure you like and subscribe, and you can go find me on Instagram at Ashley_Sunnymaid, and I will see you next week. Happy sewing!